proved to be much more severe in the first quarter of last year, going into the second quarter of last year, than anybody anticipated. So, I mean, I think we can score political points on the basis of the fact that we underestimated how severe the job losses were going to be. But those job losses took place before any stimulus, whether it was the ones that you guys have proposed or the ones that we proposed, could have ever taken into effect. Now, that's just the fact, Mike, and I don't think anybody would dispute that. You could not find an economist who would dispute that. Now, at the same time, as I mentioned, most economists, Republican and Democrat, liberal and conservative, would say that had it not been for the stimulus package that we passed, things would be much worse. Now, they didn't fill a 7 million hole in the number of people who are unemployed. They probably account for about 2 million, which means we still have 5 million folks in there that we've still got to deal with. That's a lot of people. The package that we put together at the beginning of the year, the truth is, should have reflected, and I believe reflected, what most of you would say are common sense things. This notion that this was a radical package is just not true.
We'll pick up the second part of the Obama-Pence exchange in a moment. First, back to Chris Matthews in Washington. You interviewed Congressman Pence live tonight on Hardball at 5 o'clock, and I gathered from listening to that interview that his takeaway on this was the president would not go along with our across-the-board tax cut. Is that sort of code for saying when we want the president to accept our ideas, we want him to accept our ideas and dismiss his own?
Well, I think the idea was, can you reach a compromise with the president? Yes, if he's willing to sign on to Reagan economic policies, we got a deal. He said to me, quote, I asked if he'd consider across-the-board tax cuts, and he said he would as long as they weren't across the board. Well, of course, if tax cuts are the proposal, let's talk about how to do it and compromise between those very specific kinds of tax cutting that you might call, you know, industrial policy, and I understand why the Republicans wouldn't go along with that. It's too specific. There's a lot of range between that kind of specific neoliberal tax cutting and Reagan tax cutting. Yeah, that's a compromise somewhere between the two. He's saying if you don't buy our Republican solution, you're not enjoying our company. I thought it was interesting. He said people like tax cuts. Now, there's a profile in courage. The first thing you do is throw one of these medicine balls at the president, hit him in the stomach, and say, let's chat. I mean, I think it wasn't a fair exchange right up front there. I don't think anybody thinks with a $1.4 trillion deficit right now, it's time for a huge across-the-board tax cut for the rich. I mean, that wouldn't be reasonable or responsible. And I think Mike Pence knows it. I think he knows it.
Rachel, there was still that policy of throwing the medicine ball, as Chris suggested, continued in the. It's almost felt like watching the stories of John L. Sullivan, the 19th century boxer, would volunteer to fight anybody and everybody in the House and knock them all out. I don't mean to be too partisan on this, but whatever the strategy was on the Republicans in this event, it didn't really work.
Well, and I think it was really important that this was the first question, because I think at this moment, Mike Pence says, I'm the chairman of this conference, I'm going to reserve the right to make a comment and ask the first question, and he comes out with this list of bumper stickers, this so-called stimulus bill, which gets a big smile out of President Obama, a piecemeal list of projects, boutique tax cuts. Jimmy Carter proposed things like this. I mean, he comes out with this, just hitting him from, you know, really far-right talking points right off the bat. And that's the sort of moment where we realize, depending on how the president responds to this, this is either going to be a huge day or this is going to be really boring in an exchange of talking points. And Obama comes back with this edge. I'm assuming you're not blaming me for these things that happened before I got there. Go ahead if you want to score political points. That's just a fact, Mike. And I think at that point, that's when we all realized, oh, get the popcorn.
Yeah, see if you can find an economist who disagrees. He didn't say a Republican one or a Democratic one. Yeah.